of a high opinion of Jason Fung until now, but recently he talked about having a lower protein or calories periodically, or one or too much IGF-1 had for longevity. Plus, that's just nonsense. That's all bloody nonsense. Our ancestors, if they were basically, they would have been riddled with cancer. It's not how it works. Cancer is a mitochondrial it's due to mitochondrial damage and senescence, severe senescence. We do not suffer severe senescence by eating protein. It doesn't cause the problem. Once you basically get into a cancerous state, everything can actually be used by normal cells as can be used by cancer cells. So it's completely and utterly irrelevant. This is just reductionism. And IGF-1 and insulin, if he understood the history of IGF-1 and insulin, actually understood the physiology of insulin, if you go to species that are in close to the vents within the oceans where early life is believed originated, some of those species still have IGF-1 and insulin as one thing. It's called insulin IGF-1. It's not separate. So when insulin goes up, so does IGF-1. They go in lockstep. They're like that bound together, and they influence mTOR as well. So when you actually eat protein, you actually activate insulin IGF-1, but not to the same level as carbohydrate. And the insulin to glucagon counterbalances that. So it's a non-issue. You cannot overexpress. You can only overexpress IGF-1 if you're in a high carbohydrate state, and you're engaging the Randall cycle. Then you can actually have an insulin to glucagon ratio of 70, not 1.3 or 0.8 like in fasting. But so in a carnivore state, it's just slightly above fasting, 1.3 insulin to glucagon ratio. So where insulin goes, so does IGF. If insulin goes below 1, so does IGF-1. That's what happens in a fast. If insulin just goes up to 1.3 when you eat a steak, that's where IGF-1 goes to the similar. It goes in lockstep. So it's not an overexpression. Even basically insulin, even eating pure glucose, insulin will go to 4, a 4-to-1 in terms of insulin to glucagon. And so will IGF-1. So eating a pure potato, which you can go, engaging the Randall cycle, and you can lose weight, your insulin and IGF-1 will be much lower. And so on a steak, as long as you don't put any sugar, the moment you introduce sugar with a steak, with protein and all that, it magnifies the effect. That's why people, when they eat a lot of sugar and fat and protein together, it can, like in a fast food sort of setting, they can actually get an insulin to glucagon of 70, as high as 70, which basically means that IGF-1 is going to be sky high, and so will mTOR. So they're seeing things in a reductionist way. They're not seeing things in a holistic way, how different macro combinations have different effects on these signaling molecules, because that's what they are. They signal to the body's growth pathways. When you have protein and leucine in there, what you're signaling to the body is, I want to build tissue, protein, build muscle. That's what a bone and muscle. That's not unhealthy. That's a healthy thing to do. It's not catabolic. You're not wasting away. That's a healthy thing to do. It's not saying, I want to build cancer. No. In order to get to cancer cells, that's a different thing. You have to basically put high deuterium foods to damage the mitochondria, and also have a whole lot of inappropriate foods like sugar, too much sugar and fructose and all that. Sugar, which is a mitochondrial, it actually poison is what fructose is. It causes, this inhibition of energy production. And the other thing is, interferes with energy production. The other thing, on the other hand, is the high deuterium content of both fructose and sugar, causing mitochondrial damage, and then lowering the energy levels and causing more senescence, because you don't have enough energy to repair the senescent cells. And that's the other thing. People say, well, I can't sleep, Robert, and all that. I say, what have you been doing for the last 20, 30 years? You've been basically assaulting your mitochondria to no end and doing a lot of damage. As a consequence of that severe damage to your mitochondria, you still don't have sufficient mitochondrial efficiency. So you're going, oh, it's not really helping me, Well, so the problem is that Jason does not understand this. Yeah, it drives me up the wall that these people are researchers, and they are so reductionist in their way, like David Sinclair and many others, so reductionist, they miss key things. If the body was such a simplified system, we wouldn't, we would have solved this whole, these people, Jason, I would challenge anyone to ask Jason Fung, does he understand the Randall cycle? And I bet you he doesn't. Because most of them out there don't know of Philip Randall. They don't know of Philip Randall's work, which is shocking. It really explains why, because we've got a calorie, the calorie sort of heat model over here, and we've got the endocrine model over here. So we've got the people that who are the low fat, and the reason why they're low fat, they promote low fat and high carbohydrate diets is because they want to lower the calories. So they're the calorie people, that tend to be in this sort of camp. And then you've got the other ones that are talking about the the low carb people, the keto people, and all that. They talk about all the actual, the hormones. And while both, energy is important and hormones are important, but they're interplaying in a certain way with different compositions of macros, which affect downstream at the cell, affect receptor sites in energy uptake and energy sort of management in the body. And so what they're looking at a reduction. So they go, oh, look, when you're in a low carbohydrate state, insulin goes down, hormone sensitive lipase goes up. So you're actually basically, you're releasing fat. You're actually oxidizing fat. You're going to lose weight. Same thing happens in a low fat state. And they can't explain that. And they'll argue, oh, that's bullshit and all that. But it does happen. And I've done a one where I showed on Walter Kempner, 94% carbohydrate, 4% protein, and 2% fat. This was research done back in the 1920s and 30s. And Walter Kempner demonstrated quite clearly that you could actually lose weight and actually correct a certain ailments because you disengage the Randall cycle. And it was that research that affected other researchers in the low fat but the thing, Walter understood that short term you can do that, long term that'll create deficiencies and problems and health problems. So he just used it as a short term intervention. Had he known probably about, the John Hopkins research in the 1920s using ketogenic diets to fix up epilepsy, he may have employed that method, because now, like Jason Fung and people like that, because he's a nephrologist, they use this method to fix this sort of. But both camps don't understand that it all has to do with a Randall cycle. That both can actually cause some level of uncoupling. Both approaches, low fat, low carb, can also increase AMPK. We know it's in the research. You can do it even in animal models exists. But what they're missing, both these camps, and they're warring against each other, what they're missing is that, the Randall cycle. Not understanding the Randall cycle is where the confusion is happening. Why most of the population out there that is on mixed diets, because that's what the processed food industry promotes primarily. In the past, it was like 2/3 animal foods, 1/3 plants, and you were quite physically active and you were restoring glycogen and stuff like that. And you could remain quite relatively slim in the 50s and 60s and like that. But that was pre-refrigeration, where you couldn't store carbohydrates for all year round, or fruit or whatever. Now they can, due to refrigeration and different types of refrigeration and transport from other parts of the world. But that's what these guys are so caught up in, this sort of reductionist thinking, that they miss so much nuancing when it comes, and they don't understand the historical side of things and whatever else. So yeah, it's pretty bad.